The crimson sun loomed high above, its oppressive glow spilling across the ruined landscape. Captain Hana pressed herself low against a jagged crystal ridge, every muscle in her body aching from the weight of exhaustion. Her hands, stained with the faint azure hue of her people, clutched the fractured remains of her energy spear. Once that weapon had been a proud heirloom of her lineage, passed reverently from one generation to the next. Now it was nothing but a hollow relic, its core crackling weak sparks into the dusty air before fading into silence. Around her stretched the crystalline plains of Velara Prime, a place that had once sung with natural beauty. Jagged towers of translucent stone had sparkled like frozen lightning, rising from the ground in endless patterns that shifted with the light of the sun. To Hana, they had always felt eternal. But now, every surface bore scars of war, blackened scorch marks, shattered ridges, and the twisted remains of once living structures. The battlefield was silent, except for the faint howl of the planetary winds. Hana's gaze swept the field before her. The bodies of 27 Corvani soldiers lay strewn across the crystal flats, their once proud armor cracked and dulled. Each of them had followed her into battle without hesitation. Each had trusted her command. Now she was the last one breathing, and the weight of their sacrifice pressed against her chest harder than the broken spear she still gripped. For a long moment she closed her eyes, letting the reality crash down. She could still hear echoes of their war cries, still see the light in their eyes as they had charged together into the oncoming storm. And she could still hear the sharp silence when one by one their voices had been extinguished. She had failed them. But as the thought dug into her heart, Hana forced her shoulders straight. She could not afford to drown in despair. Not yet. Faint hum vibrated through the air, pulling her eyes upward. On the horizon, dark shapes emerged. Massive machines, their silhouettes blotting out the crimson sky. The Kyle Dominion's war machines. They moved with unnatural precision, legs pounding the earth in rhythmic unity. Their weapons glowed with simmering energy, each pulse sending ripples across the ruined crystal plains. Hana's grip on the broken spear tightened. She was unarmed, exhausted, and alone. Yet retreat was no longer an option. Behind her, beyond the fractured ridges, lay the last sanctuary of her people. If she fell here, the enemy would march unopposed into the heart of Velara Prime's final refuge. She rose slowly, every muscle screaming in protest. The sun glared down upon her, setting the battlefield aflame with crimson light. The broken spear felt pitiful in her hands, yet she lifted it high, her shadow stretching long across the field. The Kyle machines paused at the sight of her lone figure. Then, almost mockingly, their weapons began to glow brighter. Hana inhaled deeply, drawing strength from the memory of her fallen warriors. She whispered their names under her breath, one by one, as if each syllable could forge armor around her heart. When the first blast of energy streaked across the battlefield, she did not flinch. She ran forward, screaming her defiance into the uncaring sky. Her scream carried across the battlefield, echoing against the shattered crystal towers. The blast missed her by inches, detonating against the ground and showering her in shards of burning stone. Her body moved on instinct, weaving between the bursts of energy, feet pounding against the brittle terrain. Each step threatened to give way beneath her, but she pressed on, rage and grief propelling her forward. Another explosion rocked the earth. She leapt through the smoke, broken spear raised like a banner of defiance. In the back of her mind, Hana knew this charge was hopeless. No lone soldier could stand against the might of Dominion war machines. But if she was to fall, she would fall as her ancestors had, fighting, unyielding and unafraid. The first machine loomed before her, its metallic frame towering like a god forged of steel. Its weapons swiveled down to meet her charge, the glow of its cannons searing the air. Hana screamed again and hurled herself forward. The broken spear struck the machine's armor with a hollow clang, snapping the last shard of crystal from its tip. The weapon shattered completely, leaving only a rod of useless metal in her hands. The machine's cannon fired at point-blank range. The world went white. When Hana awoke, silence blanketed the battlefield. Her ears rang faintly, and every nerve burned as if her body had been struck by lightning. She coughed, dragging herself upright. Somehow, impossibly, she still breathed. The machine that had fired upon her lay collapsed in a heap, smoke billowing from its fractured joints. Hana's eyes widened. She had struck it with nothing but a broken spear, yet the machine was destroyed. She staggered back, her mind racing. Had the ancient weapon carried some hidden power, or had something else intervened? Before she could form an answer, a shadow fell across her. She turned and her breath caught. Standing amid the wreckage was a figure unlike any she had ever seen. The being was tall, armored in dark plating unfamiliar to her eyes. Its movements were fluid, efficient, and carried a weight of confidence that chilled her bones. The visor of its helmet glowed faintly, reflecting the red sun above. The figure reached down and pulled the shattered spear from her hands, inspecting it briefly before tossing it aside. "You fought well," a voice rumbled from behind the mask. The words were strange, yet Hana somehow understood them. "But this is no longer your war." The stranger's words lingered in the air like a challenge, heavy and absolute. Hana's chest tightened. Her people had bled for this ground, and now this armored being dared to declare it was no longer her war. Fury flared within her, yet caution pulled against it. The figure before her was no ordinary soldier. She steadied herself, wiping the dust and blood from her lips. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but unyielding. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it turned its helmeted head toward the horizon where more Dominion machines advanced, their towering silhouettes marching with mechanical certainty. Only then did it reply, voice low and edged with something unshakable. "I am human." The word meant nothing to Hana. Her people's archives contained no record of such a species, yet there was something in his tone, a quiet weight that made the word feel older than empires. Before she could question further, the soldier stepped past her, walking toward the incoming machines as if their size and power meant nothing. Hana stared in disbelief. No armor of her world could withstand even a single blast, yet this human moved with a calm that bordered on arrogance. The machines locked onto him, weapons hummed, charging for annihilation. Hana opened her mouth to warn him, but the words froze as the battlefield erupted. The human moved like a storm-given flesh. He surged forward, impossibly fast, his dark armor cutting through the haze of light and smoke. Energy blasts roared toward him, but each shot bent away, curving off course as if the air itself rejected their path. He leapt high, a blur against the crimson sky, and came down upon the nearest machine with a force that split steel like parchment. Hana's breath caught. The Dominion war machine collapsed in two jagged halves, its core exploding in a shower of sparks. The human did not pause. He tore through the battlefield, each strike deliberate, each movement a seamless blend of raw power and precise intent. Where her people had fallen in waves, he advanced alone, and the machines crumbled before him. Hana staggered back, unable to reconcile what she witnessed. Was he some kind of weapon, bred for war? Or was he truly just human? Within minutes, the battlefield fell silent once more. Smoking carcasses of Dominion machines lay scattered, their hulking frames nothing but twisted ruins. The human stood among them, breathing steady, his visor glinting in the dying light. Slowly he turned back toward her. "You've lost too much already," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'll finish what your people began. But you must survive. Your world still needs you." Hana's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, to refuse the idea that a stranger could shoulder the war her people had carried for generations. Yet the truth was undeniable. She had nothing left, no soldiers, no weapon, not even strength. And this, being this human, had just done what her entire unit could not. Her knees buckled, the exhaustion of battle and grief finally breaking through. She collapsed onto the shattered ground, tears streaking her dust-stained face. For the first time in days, perhaps in years, she let herself feel the weight of despair. The human knelt beside her. He did not speak platitudes or offer false comfort. Instead, he rested a gauntleted hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture, steady and grounding. And in that silence, Hana realized something she could not explain. The human was more than just a soldier. He was a force her people had never encountered, a presence that reshaped the very meaning of defiance. The days that followed blurred into fragments. Hannah remembered the trek back to the hidden refuge, though the path seemed endless. The human led her with unwavering purpose, navigating terrain she had known since childhood, yet could barely recognize now beneath scars of war. Whenever she faltered, he adjusted his pace. Whenever the Dominion patrols appeared on the horizon, he destroyed them before they came close enough to threaten. Word spread quickly through the surviving Corvani outposts. A stranger had appeared, a warrior unlike any they had seen, who fought with the fury of 10 armies. Some whispered he was a phantom born of their ancestors' prayers. Others feared he was some new Dominion weapon in disguise. But when Hannah spoke of him, she told only the truth. He had saved her when all seemed lost. The Corvani leaders gathered in the refuge, their faces drawn with suspicion and hope in equal measure. Hannah stood among them, still bandaged and weary, but her voice carried when she spoke. "This human turned the tide where we had none," she said. "Without him, I would not be standing here. Without him, the Dominion would already be upon us. I do not know his origin, but I know his strength. If we turn him away, we forfeit our only chance." Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. The elders, bound by tradition, shifted uncomfortably. To entrust their survival to an outsider was unthinkable, yet to deny what they had seen was impossible. Finally, the human himself spoke, breaking the tension with words as sharp as steel. "I am not here to command your people," he said. "I am here because the Dominion must fall. If you wish to fight, stand beside me. If not, then step aside." The audacity of the declaration silenced the room. Never had anyone spoken to the council in such a way. Yet the conviction in his voice was unshakable. For Hannah, the choice was clear. She stepped forward and placed her hand over her heart. "Then I will fight beside you," she vowed. One by one, others followed. Not all, but enough. Enough to light the spark of resistance once more. That night, as the refuge prepared for war, Hannah sat alone atop the crystalline cliffs overlooking the shattered plains. The stars above shimmered faintly, their beauty dulled by the haze of war. She thought of her fallen soldiers, of the faces she would never see again. And then she thought of the human, standing unbowed against impossible odds. She whispered a silent promise to the night sky. "I will not fail again. Not while he still fights." Behind her, the sound of approaching footsteps drew her from her thoughts. She turned to see the human, his armor dimly lit by the glow of the crystals. "You should rest," he said simply. "So should you," she countered. He tilted his head, as though considering her words, then sat beside her. For a long time neither spoke. They simply stared into the distance, two warriors bound by loss and the fragile thread of hope. And in that quiet moment, Hannah felt the faintest spark of something she had thought lost forever: belief. The days after the council's reluctant agreement were a blur of movement and preparation. Hidden caches of weapons were unearthed, old defense grids repaired with trembling hands, and the younger recruits trained late into the night, clinging to the possibility of survival. Yet through it all, one presence remained unshaken: the human. He moved through the encampment like a silent storm, watching, advising, and fighting alongside them when the Dominion scouts pressed too close. Hannah noticed how the soldiers watched him in return, their fear slowly dissolving into awe. He was proof that the Dominion could bleed, proof that they could fight back. But Hannah also saw something else. Behind the human's calm precision, there was weight in his eyes, a burden as old as the stars. When he thought no one watched, his gaze drifted to the horizon with the quiet stillness of someone who had seen too many wars. One evening, as the training yard echoed with the clash of blades, Hannah approached him. "You fight like you've done this your entire life," she said. He didn't look at her. Instead, he adjusted the grip of his weapon and replied evenly, "Because I have." The simplicity of the answer chilled her more than any scream could. She wanted to ask how many battles, how many worlds he had fought for, but the silence that followed told her enough. He carried the scars of countless wars, and yet he was still here, The Dominion did not wait long to respond. Scouts reported entire columns of war machines advancing through the southern valleys, their march relentless, their destination clear. The refuge was no longer a secret. Panic rippled through the camp. Some argued for retreat, others for surrender, but Hannah remembered the promise she had whispered beneath the stars. She refused to bow again. Standing before the gathered fighters, she raised her voice. "We are outnumbered, we are outgunned, but we are not broken. The Dominion believes this world is already theirs. Tonight we show them they are wrong." Her words carried fire, but it was the human who gave them steel. Stepping beside her, he looked across the crowd and said only one sentence: "Fight as though the galaxy is watching, because it is." The soldiers erupted in a roar, their fear transformed into something sharper: resolve. The battle came at dawn. The Dominion's machines advanced like a tidal wave, their metal feet cracking the earth beneath them. The sky filled with their drones, swarming in formations that blotted out the sun. Hannah felt her chest tighten as the first barrage of energy fire rained down, the world around her exploding in fire and dust. Yet through the chaos, the human charged forward. His armor flashed as he leapt into the heart of the storm, tearing through drone swarms with a ferocity that defied reason. The Corvani followed, emboldened by his defiance. The clash was unlike anything Hannah had ever experienced. Blades sparked. Against alloy, shields shattered beneath Dominion blasts, and the very ground trembled with the weight of war. She fought beside her people, every strike fueled by the memory of those she had lost. But it was the human who turned the tide. One point, a towering siege walker broke through the lines, its cannons primed to reduce the refuge to ash. Hannah watched in horror as it loomed over their defenses, until the human vaulted onto its back. In a single motion, he drove his blade deep into its core, ripping it apart from within. The explosion lit the battlefield like a second sunrise. The Corvani cheered, their voices cutting through the roar of war. For the first time, the Dominion faltered, but victory was not without cost. Hours later, when the battlefield finally fell silent, the refuge lay scarred. Fires smoldered where homes once stood. Bodies of friends and enemies alike littered the ground. Hannah walked among them, her armor cracked, her blade chipped, her soul weary. She found the human standing at the edge of the cliffs, staring into the distance. His armor was scorched, his movement slowed, but his presence was unbroken. "They'll come again," he said without turning. Hannah swallowed hard. "Then we'll be ready." He looked at her finally, and though his visor hid his eyes, she felt the weight of his gaze. Readiness is not enough. The Dominion does not stop. They consume until nothing remains. To defeat them, you must strike. At their core, the thought terrified her. Attacking the Dominion directly was suicide. Yet as she looked at him, she realized he wasn't suggesting it. He was promising it. "You mean to take the fight to them," she whispered. His silence was confirmation. That night, as the camp tended to its wounded and mourned its dead, Hannah found herself restless. She sought the human again, drawn by a mix of fear and determination. "You can't do this alone," she told him. His reply was calm, almost gentle. "I never intended to." Something in her chest shifted at those words. For so long she had believed her people's struggle was theirs alone, but this stranger, this human, had made their war his own. And for the first time, she wondered if the galaxy might yet hold a future beyond despair. The following days became a crucible. Plans were drawn, alliances sought, and hidden networks awakened. Rumors spread beyond their world, whispers of a warrior from a forgotten species who stood against the Dominion's might. Some dismissed it as myth, others listened and prepared. Through it all, Hannah remained at his side. She watched how he carried himself, how he never faltered in his purpose, yet never allowed arrogance to blind him. In every word, every choice, there was discipline carved by fire. One evening, as they studied stolen Dominion maps by the glow of crystal lanterns, Hannah asked softly, "Why do you fight? Not just here, but everywhere?" The human paused. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a voice heavy with memory, he answered, "Because someone has to." It was not the answer she expected, yet it was the only one that made sense. The decision came swiftly. To end the Dominion's grip, they would strike at the heart of its operations, the central command hub buried deep within the mountains. A fortress said to be impenetrable, defended by legions and machines beyond counting. The Corvani Council balked at the plan. It was madness. But the human's voice cut through their doubts like a blade through steel. Impenetrable is a word. Made by those who already lost, he said. We have not lost. And for once, Hana believed it. The night before the assault, the camp was silent. Soldiers sharpened their blades in quiet resolve. Mothers whispered farewells to their children, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Hana sat by the fire, her hands trembling as she cleaned her weapon. The human approached, his shadow long in the firelight. Fear is not weakness, he said. She met his gaze. Then what is it? Proof that what you fight for matters. The words settled into her heart like a seed of fire. She realized then that the war was no longer about survival alone. It was about defiance, about refusing to let the Dominion decide the fate of every star they touched. And with the human at her side, perhaps, just perhaps, that defiance could ignite something greater. The march toward the mountains began under a shroud of silence. The Corvani moved like shadows through the broken valleys, their eyes fixed on the distant glow of the Dominion stronghold carved into the cliffs. Above them, the sky swirled with storm clouds, as if the heavens themselves braced for what was to come. Hana walked near the front, her heart pounding with each step. The human led them without hesitation, every movement precise, as though he had already walked this path in some forgotten war. His presence steadied the others, but Hana sensed the truth. This mission balanced on the edge of a blade. The fortress was a mountain of steel and fire. Towers bristled with cannons, drones patrolled in endless circuits, and energy shields shimmered like a false horizon. To the Corvani, it was a vision of despair. To the human, it was a target. This is where it ends, he said, his voice steady. Not for them, for us. The assault began at nightfall. Explosions ripped through the valley as Corvani sabotage. Teams disabled outer defenses. Waves of fighters stormed the gates, their cries echoing against the steel walls. Hana led her squad with a ferocity that shocked even herself, her blade carving arcs of light through the Dominion ranks. But the true storm came from the human. He tore through the battlefield with unrelenting force, his every strike dismantling. Machines that had once seemed invincible. Where others faltered, he pressed forward. Where fear threatened to break them, his defiance reignited their will. The Dominion commander unleashed war beasts and siege engines, desperate to crush the assault. Yet even they fell beneath the human's hand. Hana saw him stand against a Titan walker twice his height, dismantling it piece by piece until it collapsed in flames. For a moment she thought he might be unstoppable, but then she saw the blood. Beneath the scorched armor, wounds marked his body. Every breath he drew was heavier than the last, yet he fought on as if the galaxy itself demanded it. The inner gates fell. The Corvani surged into the fortress, their banners rising above steel corridors for the first time in generations. But victory was not yet theirs. At the heart of the mountain lay the Dominion's core nexus, a pulsating engine of control and power. If it remained intact, the Dominion would rise again. The human knew this. This is the center, he told Hana. Destroy it, and the Dominion will feel the wound across 1,000 systems. She looked at him, fear and resolve clashing in her chest. And if we fail, he placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and unyielding. Then history ends here, but not quietly. The final chamber was a cathedral of machinery. Towering conduits pulsed with raw energy, feeding into a crystalline core that glowed like a captured star. Dominion elites stood guard, armored and unflinching, their weapons humming with lethal promise. The battle that followed was chaos given form. Hana fought with everything she had, her blade a blur against the enemy's steel. Around her, the Corvani clashed with the Dominion's best, screams and fire echoing in the vast chamber. And at the center, the human waged war alone. He cut through, the elites with brutal precision, his movements fueled not by rage but by sheer unshakable will. Each strike drew blood, each fall echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. Yet the Dominion commander rose to meet him, a towering figure clad in obsidian armor, wielding a blade forged from living energy. Their duel shook the chamber. Sparks rained as steel met energy, the sound reverberating through the fortress like thunder. Hana could only watch, her own battle momentarily forgotten, as the human faced an opponent who seemed his equal. For minutes that felt like lifetimes, the clash raged. Then, with a final surge, the human drove his blade through the commander's chest. The Dominion leader fell, his armor shattering like glass. The chamber went silent until the core began to destabilize. The fortress trembled as alarms screamed. The crystalline heart pulsed violently, threatening to erupt with catastrophic force. Hana staggered toward the human. "We have to leave, now." But he shook his head. His armor was cracked, his body failing. "If it detonates uncontrolled, the valley dies. Someone must stay." Her eyes widened. "No, you can't." He stopped her with a look, calm and unyielding. "You must carry this forward. Tell them we are not myths. Tell them humans still stand." Tears burned in her eyes as the realization struck. He had never intended to survive. His war had always been larger than himself. Before she could speak, he placed something in her hand, a small emblem, worn and scarred, marked with the insignia of a world long gone. "Earth, keep it," he said. "Remember us." And with that, he turned back toward the core. The Corvani fled the fortress, dragging Hana with them as the mountain began to collapse. The night sky lit with fire as the core detonated, the explosion tearing through the valley and shattering Dominion forces for miles. When the smoke cleared, the fortress was gone. Only ruins remained, ruins and the memory of the human who had stood against the Dominion. Hana stood on the cliffs, the emblem clutched in her hand, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. Around her, her people wept, but also raised their voices in a new kind of cry. Not of despair, but of defiance. The legend of the human had been written in fire. Weeks passed. The Dominion reeled from the loss, their iron grip fractured across systems. Whispers spread faster than any fleet, whispers of a forgotten warrior who had stood alone against an empire and won. Some called him a ghost, others a myth. But Hana knew the truth. He had been real, and because of him, hope had returned. Datiti Corvani rebuilt, not as scattered survivors, but as a people reborn. Other worlds began to rise as well, inspired by the tale of resistance. The Dominion, for the first time in centuries, faced something they had never known: fear. On quiet nights, Hana would sit beneath the stars, the human's emblem resting in her hands. She would close her eyes and remember his words. "Fight as though the galaxy is watching, because it is." And she vowed that when the day came, when the Dominion returned in greater force, the galaxy would not find them unprepared. For now, they carried a new banner, not just of the Corvani, not just of rebels, but of something greater. They carried the banner of humanity, and with it, they would burn brighter than the Dominion ever dreamed.